Good morning, everyone. We've already completed a sound check with a few people that logged on early, so thank you for your help with that. Okay, so let's get started. We have designed today's webinar to give you an understanding of how PAYE Modernisation will affect your business and what impact it will have on running your client's payroll. PAYE Modernisation will involve the most significant reform of the PAYE system since its introduction in 1960. Employers will need to calculate and report their employees' pay and deductions as they are being paid. This will make it easier for revenue, employers and employees to ensure that the right tax is deducted and paid at the right time. We have two presenters presenting today. First up, we have our main speaker, Paul Byrne, who is the Managing Director here at Thesaurus Software. After qualifying as a chartered accountant, Paul went on to set up and manage his own accountancy practice. Paul co-founded Thesaurus Software in 1991 with the goal of providing payroll software to Irish businesses. Thesaurus Software now provides quality software products and excellent customer service to over 120,000 businesses across the UK and Ireland. We are delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Sinead Sweeney, who is the PAYE Modernisation Change Manager at Revenue. Sinead is very much on the front line when it comes to PAYE modernisation and will also deliver a presentation today from Revenue's perspective. So welcome, Sinead. For our Q&A session at the end, we will have Paul and Sinead, and we will also be joined by Audrey Mooney from the support team here at Thesaurus Software. So first up is Paul, who will discuss PAYE modernisation, understanding and implementing the new legislation for your clients. Next, we will pass over to Sinead for the revenue presentation. And finally, at the end, we will have the questions and answers. Today's webinar will give you 1.5 CPD hours. If you would like a CPD certificate, please fill out the survey at the end of today's webinar, and we will email these out within the next couple of weeks. Throughout the webinar, you can type in any questions you may have into the Questions tab on your control panel at the right of your screen. We'll try to get through as many questions as possible. Just bear in mind there are a lot of attendees logged on today, so we may not get through all the questions. Finally, today's session is being recorded. We will email everyone with a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation slides later today. So I'll now pass you over to Paul to begin today's presentation.
Now, thank you for that, Rachel. I know Sandra Clark was due to join us today. Sandra's a tax expert. Unfortunately, she couldn't. She was called away to something else. So hopefully we know the answers to all the difficult tax questions that may come in later on. But if there are any questions that we don't know the answer to, we'll ask Sandra to have a look at them at another stage and get back to you. Okay, so as Rachel was saying, PAYE modernisation or real-time reporting is probably the biggest overhaul of the PAYE system since PAYE itself was introduced back in 1960. That makes it 1 year older than myself, so it's lasted well. So why is it happening? Well, currently lots of employees are being given the wrong tax credits and cut-off points, and this is because Revenue only gets payroll data once a year in the form of the P35. So receiving the data in real time will ensure that Revenue can allocate the correct credits, thereby hopefully avoiding any over or underpayments of tax at the end of the year. Revenue will know where the taxpayer is working and how much they are earning. Also, many employers themselves are not operating PAYE correctly in that they don't register new employees or they use out-of-date tax credits, and this is also being addressed by PAYE modernisation. So essentially a file, and let's call it a mini P35, will be submitted electronically to Revenue on or before each pay run. In most cases, this means the file is submitted either weekly or monthly. Also, the retrieval of tax credits will be automated, which should ensure that the correct credits are being applied by employers. With PAYE modernisation, the new files are called a Revenue Payroll Notification, or RPN for short, and this is used to retrieve tax credits and cut-off points for new and existing employees. And this is the file that replaces the existing P2C file. Then there is the payroll submission request, known as the PSR. or as we might refer to it here as the mini P35, and this will be used to submit payroll data to revenue each pay period. The full file specifications are included in the links on screen, and we have also included them in the handout section on your control panel if you wish to download them. Okay, because this is a CPT accredited webinar, we need to do a poll here just to make sure that you're paying attention. So the question here is, what does RPN stand for? Is it A, revenue payroll notification, B, revenue payroll number, or C, real-time payment notice? So at the moment, there should be a poll on your screen, and you can just tick which option you think is the correct answer. So the results are in, and I can say that 95% chose the correct answer, which is, of course, A, revenue payroll notification. Okay, so APIs. As I say, it stands for Application Programming Interface, and this enables different software applications to communicate with each other. In our case, it allows our payroll software to directly interact with revenue systems. So instead of the very manual routines of downloading or uploading, selecting file locations, logging in screens, etc., there will be just one submit button to replace all of this. So for example, look at how tax credits, P2Cs, are retrieved at present. You log into your ROS account, you go to the Revenue Record tab, you then select P2C details, you then search the relevant tax year, then you export, which involves choosing where to save to. Then in your payroll software, you go to the relevant P2C import section. You need to select the correct file from the correct location and then import. So by my count, there are at least 9 steps involved in that process. With the API, it will be one click to achieve all of the above. Similarly, with the periodic payroll submission, or our mini P35, the actual transfer of this data to revenue will also be a one-click process. So because of the APIs for the RPN retrievals and file submissions, the actual work required each pay period should be less than it is at present. So the main message here is that if you are a normal by-the-book employer who pays your staff using payroll software, the new system in 2019 should bring you time savings and a much more fluid experience each pay period. It is probably revenue who face the biggest challenge of all in making sure that their systems work the way they should from the start. With any big bang approach, there are risks that things may not go smoothly. I know myself from working alongside revenue on this project that they're doing everything they can to ensure that the new system will work out of the box. So we all hope that Murphy's Law keeps at bay in this case. Okay, so let's look at a typical pay period and the sequence of events and where the APIs come into play. Firstly, you enter the details of new employees into the payroll, if there are any. Next, you retrieve the latest tax credit information, which is a one-click process. And this retrieval also looks up the tax credit information for those new employees as well. You enter the pay, hours, and deductions for all employees. Then you process and finalize the payroll. Then you submit the file to revenue. And this is a one-click process by virtue of the API. Then finally, you distribute the pay slips, be it by email, printed pay slips, or a portal, and pay the employees. We are hoping that the responses to the API requests will be answered in seconds by revenue systems, and this is something we feel is important to the user experience. It should be noted that the APIs will use the employer's or the agent's digital certificate, and this cert will need to have been installed on the computer. If the user can log into ROS on the computer, then it has the cert installed. So you may want to review your setup in advance of the 1st of January. You will need to ensure that you have a cert installed on each computer that you are using to process payroll. If the cert is on another machine, there are instructions within the ROS screens on how to back up the cert and copy to a different computer. And also in terms of your clients who may do their own payroll, it may be worth noting that if the payroll is split between, say, directors and other staff, and these are done on different machines at present, this will be a bit of a problem under the new system, as the employer cert will have more or less full visibility of the overall payroll. So this is where they would need to look at having maybe more than one employer registered number and therefore more than one cert for each of those numbers. So they therefore keep the payroll truly separate. And it should be noted that an employer can have as many registered numbers as they want. One of the benefits of the new system is that there will be no more P forms. At the end of a tax year, the individual taxpayer will be able to view and print their official certificate of earnings and deductions directly from their portal. So this means that P60s will no longer be required. The files being submitted each pay run will have details of employees commencing and employees leaving. So this means that P45s and P46s are no longer required to be completed by the employer. And as revenue we will be receiving file submissions each pay period, the annual P35 will no longer be required. In addition, this periodic file will eliminate the need for P30s. You will still need to submit a P35 this coming January or February and still need to give your employees their P60s, but this will be the last time. Okay, so this is where everything can go wrong, because we're going to do a demo of the software, and we are using software that is in testing at the moment, and we're also accessing a revenue system which is set up for a test environment. One of the main considerations, I suppose, in designing software for 2019 is to try and keep it looking as similar as possible to 2018. With the new features included, of course. So there's been a lot of changes under the hood, which you don't need to be aware of. So the first thing there is in the open company screen, which you're familiar with. And okay, I only have one company there, but it's a bit more informative than you've been used to before, in that it will show for each employer the number of PSRs which are still due to be submitted, and it'll show the status of that employer in terms of when the last pay date was, etc. So we'll just open that particular employer. And now we enter familiar territory here, in that is very similar looking to the way it was before. Just one thing to point out here as well is under the file menu, we have the ability to add the digital certificate. I won't go into that at the moment because that's still a little bit under development. But that will enable agents to enter their agent certificate, and that'll be they'll only need to do that once for all the employers that agent certificate applies to. So it's a one-off entering the digital certificate. So as we showed on the payroll processes earlier, the first thing you would do in any case is add or amend new employees' permanent details. So assuming there's no new employees in this case, and those screens are the same as before anyway, the next thing we need to do, and we have the big to-do icon showing here, is retrieve any RPN details for the employees. So I just click on this, and this is now communicating with revenue systems, and it's retrieved the RPNs for the existing employees. It also did a lookup for any new employees, but we didn't actually enter any new employees in this case. So again, this screen is familiar to what you would have seen before with the P2C retrievals, except you didn't have to go through all the long routines of getting the P2Cs into the computer. It was just, as I say, that one click to do it. On this screen, you might notice there's a couple of extra columns. One of these columns is the employment ID, and this is used to basically determine which instance or which occurrence of the employee that the credits and cutoffs are applied against. And that would happen, say, for example, where somebody leaves employment and then is reappointed again within the same tax year. That ID will be incremented. In this case, it'll be number 2. So when we retrieve the RPNs, we will know which employment ID gets the credits and cutoffs that revenue are allocating for that. The ID itself is basically handled automatically by the payroll software, and it's not something you would really need to worry about. Another column here is the RPN number, and the software uses to determine whether an update has actually happened or not, and revenue apply that number. So if any of those employees have new details and new credits, their RPN number will be incremented. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, and 4 throughout the year, and the software will know to apply the latest one in any case. And I should say as well that the actual submission that goes into revenue each pay period, the PSR, will also include that RPN number, so revenue will know whether we're actually using the most up-to-date RPN or not. So, okay, so that screen, we just click on update. In this particular case, there is no new credits or cut-offs for any of the existing employees. So we can close out of that, and our to-do flag is gone. So as normal, you can go in and process, put in hours, etc. For the employees. Then when you're finished doing all that, you go and do the preview just to make sure everything's fine, possibly email it to your client to make sure they're happy with it. And then go in and update the payroll. Okay, so we're updating here week 4, 23rd of January. Okay, so that's completed now. Now we have under the PSR icon here, it's saying there's one outstanding. So we simply go into that, click onto that, and we prepare the PSR. And that shows us a brief summary of the taxes that are included or will be included in that submission. We can view it if we wish, and that's basically kind of the raw data that is submitted with the PSR submission. And it's fairly legible, I suppose. It's nearly English, so it's quite easy to see what the details are that are being included. And then you submit the PSR to revenue. And again, this is contacting revenue, sending it, checking that revenue is getting the correct response, and it's basically outlining here the response that's been received from revenue, and we can see that they're also saying the same amount of taxes that we knew were being included in it. So we know everything's fine and it's been submitted and received. So we can close out of that. We've probably changed the sequence of when the backups are meant to happen as well within the software. Previously, we were doing it before an update happened. Now our recommendation to do it after a PSR has been submitted. And this means that at least if your computer crashes before the next time you do your payroll, when you restore, the payroll will know that you have actually submitted all of the PSRs and you don't have to try and rebuild that whole process. So we'll just close out of there. Yes, the other thing to mention as well is that we also handle the corrections. And one of the things we've needed to do as well on the 2019 software, and you'll probably be delighted to hear this, is that you can basically make corrections to an employee from a number of periods ago when you don't have to reverse everybody's payroll back to that date. So probably the only occasion you would do a complete reversal is where on this first correction here, where you've finalized the payroll, you've submitted the PSR, but you haven't actually paid the employees yet because you suddenly realize, oh, I forgot to import the hours from the clock-in system this week or this month, and I've already submitted all this. So that's a case of the oops factor. So you can just click on that and that'll look after reversing the payroll. It'll also look after deleting the submissions that have been made to revenue, so you're back to square one with that particular week or period that you got wrong. But if you're going back into previous periods, or if say a client hasn't told you, say for example that somebody started maybe 6 weeks ago, that's easily dealt with by the software as well, and it'll create all the PSRs to build up that employee's details with revenue up to the current date. Now, also another type of correction there is the wrong PRSI class, where, say for example, you have a proprietary director who has been mistakenly included a class A1, and you get to the end of the year, realize that it should have been S1. Again, it's a very simple procedure within the software to fix that, recalculate the PRSI, and submit the appropriate return to revenue for that. Another thing as well that the new software or the new year will do, and this is one of the, I suppose, the big benefits that the Irish system has over the advantages the Irish system has over the UK system, is the ability to actually query revenue system and what they call the returns lookup or returns reconciliation service. So we're actually able to look up and see what the actual liability that revenue have in record for each period, and that's very important. If things ever become out of sync, it's very important to be able to look at the particular periods that are at fault. And I'll just show you a quick example of that under reports. There are tax details here, monthly, quarterly details. Probably we would have called this before the P30 details. Go into that. That's the same as you would be used to before. But we see this line here, we have payrolls. So we can just go in and check ROS, hit the check ROS button, and that's now querying revenue systems to see how much it's actually they have on record. So you can see in this particular case, everything's fine and everything's reconciling. Okay, so I'll just close out of that. And I think that's really all I need to show you. You probably think that's probably very simplistic, but in reality, there is very little involved in extra in terms of what you need to do in 2019 on the software front. So I'll move on then to, and Rachel's going to reinstate the PowerPoint for me here. Okay, just some more information on corrections. Oh, and also the submission deadlines as well. The submission deadlines is probably one of the most important things. The periodic submission, the PSR, that must be submitted on or before the actual pay date. So, like in my view, it's probably easy to just submit after finalizing each payroll in much the same way as in the demo we just showed you there. At least you will know that the payroll is done and dusted when you close out of it. If a submission is incorrect, a correction submission can be made by the software. If the correction means that more tax is payable for a previous tax month, revenue may apply interest. Also, a correction after the month's close off or sign off date, say I think it might be the 23rd of the following month, this will be seen as a change to its statutory declaration. If there is a constant pattern of corrections for particular clients, or if there's a pattern of late submissions for particular clients, revenue may take corrective actions such as site visits or audits. Corrections are dealt with on the basis of follow the money. If an employee is over or underpaid in a period and their pay is adjusted in the next period to correct this, no correction submission is actually required in this case because the payroll is reflecting what was actually paid. If an employee is paid an amount different to what it says in the payroll, then a correction submission will subsequently be required. And to say the software does actually handle all those situations. So I suppose the question here is are you ready for on or before processing? And this applies to, I suppose, those clients where you may have had difficulty in the past getting the information in time. So I guess it's the case that those clients kind of need to be trained to maybe have a different mindset when it comes to providing you with the information. But I suppose it is going to be a challenge for some businesses, particularly the hospitality business and construction. Another question that arises here in terms of on or before is if, say, the payroll operator is going on holidays, it is possible for them to actually do the payroll for the weeks that they'll be away and to make those submissions in advance. So therefore the on or before has been complied with in those cases. Okay, just to cover the subject of manual, those people that are still doing it manually, and revenue estimates that of the total 208,000 Irish employers, up to 50,000 employers still calculate their payroll manually. These employers will still be able to calculate payroll manually. However, in each pay period, be it weekly or monthly, they will need to log into ROS and enter all the required details for all of their employees. And it's a bit like manually completing a P35 each pay period. Sinead will, during her presentation, will show you some of the screens that are involved there. And I should say also at this stage that the screens that Sinead will show you within ROS, I would envisage most of the customers that use Thesaurus Payroll Manager or BrightPay will really never have to visit those screens. Also, the facility in ROS for doing it manually is, I believe, only going to be available for employers with 5 or less employees. Another thing they have to do each week or each month is they'll have to religiously log into ROS to get details of tax credits and cutoff points. And again, this will be a very manual process and prone to error. So for these employers, for their sanity alone, never mind the huge time savings, it should become apparent that they should either be using the services of a payroll bureau, such as yourselves, or that they should be using payroll software. To quantify it somewhat, doing it manually could take 2 or 3 hours a week. The payroll software costs less than €3 per week. Okay, a brief summary of why you need to get things right. Well, firstly, employees logging into their My account will expect to see their most recent payments and for these details to be correct. Nextly, late periodic submissions will potentially give rise to interest and or penalties, plus the employer will come within revenues under revenues radar. Next, a constant pattern of correction submissions will potentially give rise to interest and or penalties, plus it could lead to revenue intervention. And next, lastly, I suppose, because the reference number of the latest RPN was I was showing you on the demonstration earlier, the RPN number, because that's included in the PSR, revenue will automatically know when RPN checking and processing is not happening. Again, just to return to the subject of split payrolls, and some employers operate, 2 different payrolls for the one company, and it could be because they have the executives or directors on one payroll and they have the other staff on the other payroll. The digital cert that for any employer will have access to all the PAYE information for that particular registered number. So the only way to truly separate such payrolls is to actually apply for a new number and therefore a new cert in those cases. And an employer can have as many of those numbers stroke certs as they wish. So again, it's something really you probably need to make some of your clients aware of in case they don't know. Also, if different branches are operated on 2 or more separate payrolls, but they all have the same registered number, we would advise that these would also have separate registered numbers and therefore separate digital certs. And that's because we do foresee issues with the new employment ID field and there being some confusion between the different branches with that ID. So, it could be very advisable actually just to keep them totally separate with different registered numbers. They're still the one legal entity, they just have different numbers. We're hoping to issue guidance on how to apply for the new PAYE numbers and certs and put that on our website shortly, but I'm sure all you guys know how to do that already. Another thing that might catch people by surprise is the new emergency rules that apply from the 1st of January of 2019. 2019 sees the removal of the first tier of emergency tax credits. So from now on, the first 4 weeks will be taxed at the standard rate up to the emergency cutoff point and at the high rate after that cutoff point, and no tax credits will apply. Thereafter, after that 4-week period, all pay will be taxed at the high rate. And as before, and as it is now, if there's no PPSN, all pay is taxed at the high rate from the very beginning. So that's, say, a change which it might have gone under the radar somewhat in terms of your own practices. These new emergency rules, they apply where an employer makes payments of emoluments to or on behalf of an employee in respect of whom an RPN has not been received. So, if when we showed you in the software earlier, when we do the lookup RPN and for the existing employees and for new employees, if we don't receive any information back for those employees that we're inquiring about, we have to automatically apply emergency tax at that stage. Where an employee does furnish the employer with a PPSN, the employer should take all reasonable measures to establish that the number furnished is in fact, a valid PPSN for that particular employee. And You may or may not be aware that within the ROS screen, there is a new button there, which is called a PPS number checker, and that should be used by employers to facilitate that. So these new emergency rules, they will greatly incentivize employees who have no record with revenue, to incentivize them to become registered. So, for example, students or non-nationals. And the Jobs and Pension Services is the first port of call for any of those prospective employees without a record. Another thing just to note as well is that the list of employees which is being sought on the ROS screens at the moment for all employers, that will help ensure that the RPNs that are retrieved at the start of 2019 is a complete list of the RPNs for existing employees. Okay, we just have another very quick poll before I finish my part of today's webinar. And this is, do you feel prepared for the introduction of PAYE Modernisation? So the options here are, do you feel extremely prepared, very prepared, somewhat prepared, or not at all prepared? Okay, an interesting result there. I think only 2% have said they're extremely prepared, and the other side, the other end of the spectrum, 10% say they're not at all prepared. We actually sent out a customer survey last week asking the same question. I don't know if the results are kind of in or about the same as we got to there today. Just on that customer poll, when customers, or sorry, the customer survey, when customers were asked this question last week, yeah, 2% said they felt extremely prepared. Yeah, it's about the same today. From the customer survey, a massive 32% said they felt not at all prepared. This figure has somewhat improved with the 10% they're saying that they are. Okay, so hopefully it's a sign that the PAYE Modernisation webinars are helping people with their preparations. Another stat from last week's survey was the employer awareness levels. When asked if they were aware of PAYE Modernisation, 7% of employers said they were not aware. With just a few months left until the introduction of PAYE Modernisation, this is worrying. It is important that all employers understand the new changes being implemented, so make sure to spread the word if you know of anyone who would benefit from any of our webinars. We have more webinars coming up in November, and these are available to everyone, not just our customers. Okay, so I'm just going to hand you back to Rachel here.
Okay, so while we're getting set up for Sinead's presentation, I'm going to give you a quick look at Thesaurus Connect. We do also offer BrightPay Connect, which offers the same online functionality and features for BrightPay customers. Thesaurus Connect works alongside Thesaurus Payroll Manager as an optional add-on. Payroll information is stored in the cloud and can be accessed online, but the payroll information or the payroll itself must be processed on the existing Thesaurus desktop application. The online functionality allows online access anywhere, anytime for accountants, employers, and their employees. Thesaurus Connect securely synchronizes and backs up payroll data to the cloud, protecting against ransomware and cyber attacks. A chronological history of backups will be maintained, which can be restored and downloaded at any time. Payroll bureaus can invite their clients to log into an online employer dashboard where they can see up-to-date payroll information. The online employer dashboard gives clients access to all employees' payslips, payroll reports, a full overview of all employee leave, amounts due to revenue, and employers can also upload employee documents such as employment contracts or staff handbooks. Along with all of the functionality available to employers and payroll clients, bureaus also have an additional layer of information available. Bureaus have an overview screen which provides a multi-company platform to view each of their payroll clients in one central location. Bureaus have the ability to click into each individual client to see their client dashboard. Bureaus also have the option to add as many users as they want to access the payroll data at no additional cost. Finally then is settings, and here an accountant or payroll bureau can add their own branding to their client's online portal. Moving on now, and this time we're going to look at an employee user. The online employee self-service facility is password protected and can be accessed on any internet browser or using a smartphone app. Here, employees can view and download current and historic payslips, P60s and P45s. Payslips are automatically added to the employee's self-service portal each pay period, eliminating the need to print or email payslips. An email is automatically sent to employees notifying them that their payslip is available, or if they're using the smartphone app, they will get a notification on their smartphone. Employees can also view HR documents that have been uploaded by their employer, such as their contract of employment or company handbook. Employees can view all past and scheduled leave in the employee calendar, including annual leave, unpaid leave, sick leave and absence leave. Here, the employee can also request leave through the employee self-service portal. Employees can also view and update their personal information, such as their postal address. Now, a new feature which is coming to Thesaurus Connect in 2019 is the ability for payroll bureaus to send requests to their client. These next few screens are still in development and will be added in 2019. Bureaus can send a payroll entry request, which allows the client to either upload a timesheet for their employees or manually enter payments, additions and deductions for their employees. All of the information included in the payroll entry request will seamlessly flow through to the Bureau's portal, ready to sync back to the payroll. A payroll approval request can also be sent. The payroll approval request will securely send a payroll summary to the client before the payroll is finalised, which can easily be approved by the client. Ultimately, your client will be accountable for ensuring the payroll information is 100% correct before the payroll is finalised. Additionally, there is an audit trail of requests being approved. This feature will be very beneficial to payroll bureaus, not only because it reduces their workload, but it can also help with PAYE modernisation. By implementing this new system of client entry and client approval, bureaus will be reducing corrections and putting the responsibility on the client, reducing the risk of non-compliance with the new PAYE system. Okay, so it now looks like Sinead is ready to go, so I'm just going to pass you over to Sinead here now.
Good morning, everybody. I suppose the presentation that I'm going to give to you this morning really is a follow-up in terms of what Paul has already gone through with you, and I suppose reinforcing it from the revenue perspective. And as Paul said, showing you some of the revenue screens and how they're going to look when the new system goes live. I suppose just to give you a further understanding of why we're doing this and the drivers behind the change, the nature of employments have changed significantly since the 1960s when this tax system was first introduced. And now you have a significant amount of employees who are working multiple contracts of employments, in some cases with the one employer, or working several jobs with different employers all at the one time. And the revenue system wasn't really designed to be able to capture that information effectively and to ensure that the employee is maximising the use of their credits and entitlements. Payroll, as you're all aware of, has changed significantly since the 1960s when people were using pen and paper, tax deduction cards and maybe abacuses at some stage. And now you have sophisticated payroll that enables you to run your payroll very smoothly, and this system will now integrate with our revenue systems. All of this is brought about because of advancement in information and communications technology, where the information that your payroll is actually going to calculate and submit to revenue will be coming into us via the internet and via the revenue systems that we have been able to design in terms of the advances in technology. And people expect to be able to deal with revenue in an e-enabled and efficient way. And at the moment, as Paul referred to, when somebody contacts the 1890 helpline and maybe has an inquiry because their tax credits are different in this particular pay period, and they're always surprised when the person on the end of the phone turns around and says, well, actually, I can't help you with that because your employer won't have that information submitted to us until the P35 comes in next year. But now with the real-time reporting, we will have information to that access almost instantaneously as the person is actually paid. So again, that will mean that we can offer a more improved and efficient service to all of our customers. We see three main beneficiaries in terms of the new system: the employer, the employee, and obviously ourselves in revenue. So for the employer, what we want is that this new system will become part of their day-to-day payroll operating systems and integrate seamlessly with their existing processes. We want to minimise the cost for employers to comply, and at the moment there is a significant administrative burden to manage all of the P-form requirements that employers have to complete during the year and also at the end of the year. So we're abolishing all of those forms, and everything will now be transacted through your payroll system or through the ROS online system. It will mean that the right tax is paid, but there's no change to the current payment date. So that's still going to be the 23rd of the following month where you're paying and filing online. And ultimately, this should result in time savings for all employers. For the employee then, they'll have simplified online services where they can view what has been paid and deducted on their behalf by their employer. They'll also be able to maximise the use of their entitlements, ensuring that they are only paying the right amount of tax, where they'll have the opportunity to spread credits between employments or between spouses. We're going to do an automatic end of year review for every employee, and that'll commence in around 2020 when we have a full year of the new data available to us. And it gives the employee the opportunity to view and see their data as it happens. And that's a new level of transparency for the employee. And unfortunately, we do have rogue employers out there who deduct PAYE and PRSI from their employees, but never actually pay it over to revenue. And generally, it only comes to light when they go to make a DEASP claim or where they go to look for a tax refund. But now, as it happens, they'll be able to view that information. For ourselves in revenue then, there's going to be a statutory in-year employer return. So at the moment, the P35 is the statutory return. There will now be a monthly return, but not a return as you know it, where you have to create and file it. We will create a statement which will become the employer's return once they're satisfied that the information is correct. This will make compliance easier from our perspective. We'll have accurate, up-to-date income details, and over time it should reduce customer contacts. We know with any new system, we expect an upsurge in customer contacts when the system goes live and in the months leading up to that go live date. To that end, we have increased our staffing numbers on our employer helpline, and there will be a significant amount of staff available to help employers during those first bedding in months. It'll also allow us to carry out timely targeted interventions. At the moment, if we go out to do a PAYE audit, we're currently looking at a year or 2 years into the past. We can now go out and audit a previous month or several months' payroll. And if there is something inaccurate or something that's been applied incorrectly, we're in a position to be able to address that before the problem actually becomes much greater and escalates. To give you an idea, and I suppose just going along with what Paul has already given you on some stats, we have 2.8 million active employments, and 256,000 of those employees are currently listed as having more than one live employment. And certainly there's a significant amount of them that have multiple employments with the same employer. We have 200,000 employers, and 111,000 of those employers have less than 5 employees. And that is something that we're cognizant of in terms of how we have designed the system, particularly for those that may not be using payroll software. 98% of those employers are currently filing with us through ROS. Just to remind everybody of their current employee and employer reporting obligations. So when they go to pay somebody, they must ensure that they're applying the latest P2C. They must calculate the tax that's to be deducted, Provide that employee with a payslip. Anytime somebody starts or leaves, they need to complete the P45, P46 process right up until the 1st of the 1st, 2019. Every month or quarter submit a P30 with the relevant payment, and by February of the following year complete a P35 with the associated listing for all employees. And it's important to bear in mind that for 2018 those requirements are still in place. So while you'll be running your new payroll for January in the new system, you'll also be doing your 2018 payrolls in February. So just to allow some additional time and to look at your own business processes in that regard. In order to do all of this, we have had to amend the legislation. The majority of it has been amended in the Finance Act 2017. The key changes are those that I've listed there. The P2C that we currently know is now going to be called a revenue payroll notification. Payroll submissions are required on or before each payroll run by the employers, before the actual employees are paid. The monthly statement that's issued by Revenue will be deemed as the employer's return by the 14th of the following month. If there happens to be a persistent technology failure, so say, for instance, something like the storms that we had more recently where power lines were down and businesses were closed, when the systems come back online, the information can then be uploaded. We will still have the direct debit facility, and we've also built in a variable direct debit where employers can just pay the amount that's due every month as per their statement. In very basic terms, this is what the process flow is going to look like for an employer. So they'll have their employees that they're going to pay. They'll be able to access the latest revenue payroll notifications, perform their calculations, finalise their payrolls, send their file for processing to the bank, create their payslips, and at the same time, a report of that information will come into Revenue. The employee then will receive their payslip, and will now be able to see their information under the Jobs and Pensions module of My Account. So how are we going to get rid of all of these P forms? So if we were to take the example of a weekly payer, so the statement that we will issue to the employer every month will contain the total tax due based on that employer's submissions for that month. So if they're weekly, they'll have either submitted 4 or 5 weekly payroll runs. They will be summarised and they will form the basis of what the liability will be on their monthly statement. If they're happy that that statement is correct and they don't need to make any corrections on it, we can deem it as their return if they do nothing, or they'll have the option to go on and accept it on the revenue system. Where you have a new employee, the whole P45, P46 process has been removed and it's now a much easier setup. So when you're commencing somebody, you'll simply insert a commencement date in the payroll, and when that information is transferred across to ourselves in Revenue, that will commence the employment. Likewise, when somebody is ceasing in an employment, you will insert a cessation date, and again, when that information comes into Revenue, that person's employment will be ceased and their tax credits and rate bands will now become available for their new employer when they put them on their payroll. The end of year return, the P35, it's now gone, and there isn't an end of year return required. Every month is now a statutory return. There's no option to tidy up at year end. So it is very important that you actually look at your processes at the moment, particularly if you are focused on the end of year, and try to put processes in place that will allow you to do this monthly. For 2019, you'll also no longer be obliged to provide a P60 for your employees, and instead the employees will have the option to go onto My Account and access an end of year statement through the My Account portal. So for the majority of you that are using software, this is how your software is going to interact with Revenue. So on starting the payroll, your software will request the revenue payroll notifications for all employees that have been amended since the last payroll run. They will also request RPNs for any new employees who have not been paid before. Revenue will then allocate the credits based on the most up-to-date information available for each of those employees. The payroll software will use the details that we have returned in the RPN to calculate the statutory deductions for each employee. And if new employees are added at this stage, the software will once again request a new RPN for that employee. The payroll software will then submit to revenue the details of each employee with their pay and statutory deductions in the form of your end of payroll report. The start and the end date for each employee will be sent as part of that payroll submission. We will then send back an acknowledgement to say that we have received your submission, and we will also send a payroll software response if there are errors with the submission. In order to access the Ross online facility, as Paul mentioned, the people using the payroll software and submitting the payroll reports to revenue must have access to the digital certificate. And when you go to log on to Ross outside of the payroll software, you will be asked to input that Ross digital certificate password. So once you've logged on there, what you're going to see is a My Frequently Used Services homepage. And you'll see there you have the option to request an RPN, to check a PPSN number. There's PAYE Modernisation information there as well. You'll be able to submit your payroll and view your payroll, and then where you're operating outside of the payroll, you'll be able to access the statement of account. And again, this is where the employer will need to view monthly what their liability is. So an RPN request, and again, bearing in mind this is where your software is not doing this for you. You can request RPNs by file upload, or you can request RPNs by online form. File upload is where you have payroll software, but it's not engaged directly with revenue, and requesting by online form is where you're not using payroll software. And you will upload a file, or you will submit the details for the people that you are requesting RPNs for, and then they will be returned to you. Then you can calculate your payroll as normal, and then you go to submit that payroll to revenue. So again, you go back to the frequently used services page and you go to click on submit payroll. Where you're not using payroll software, we will have populated all of your employees for you. So you will click on the relevant employees that you're going to pay. So in this case, I've highlighted Paddy O'Brien, and we're going to pay Paddy O'Brien today. So you'll go in then and select a pay frequency. And again, you'll only have to do this the first time that you set somebody up on the system. So once you've selected the pay frequency, then you'll click on next, and what you'll get is the details of their tax credits and rate bands. And you'll see there are 3 boxes that you're then going to have to populate. So this is how the overall statement will look. And then when you click into employee details and pay and deductions, you'll be faced with a screen something like this, where you will have to fill in the details of the pay from the gross down to the net, including all of the statutory deductions in between. So pay for income tax, pay for USC, if you're deducting LPT, there's an option to fill in all of that there. And you'll do that for each of your employees, save and submit it. And what comes back to you will be the details filled in on this submission item. If you're happy with that, then you save it. It gives you a line detail view of what you have just put in for the person. And once you're happy with everything there, then you will submit that payroll submission. Once you've done that, then you'll get back an acknowledgement to thank you for your submission with a unique reference number, and that then becomes your payroll submission for that particular period. If you need to go back in and view a payroll, maybe you want to go back in and check something that you've done in a previous payroll submission, you'll be able to select previous payroll runs. And again, it'll be a drop-down selection. And then you can put in whatever details it is that you want to search for, and it will bring you up that specific payroll run. When you go in, then you can actually see what the submissions referred to and which ones you had sent in. You'll see there on the top one there's an invalid item. So again, if you went in there to view that, it'll tell you what the invalid item is. Down further, you'll see there was a warning issued for one of the lines of data that was submitted because they used an out-of-date RPN. On the one below that in blue where it says a correction, that's where somebody went in and made a correction to that line data. So again, it's all pretty user friendly, and it'll all be explained in each of the sections as to if there is an invalid item or if there is an out-of-date RPN being used. Again, these screens are really just for demo purposes to show you what it will look like where you have received information, where we have received information that is incorrect and you need to go and correct it. You'll see there on this one there were 7 invalid items submitted, and in general invalid items will refer to PPSNs, either no PPSNs or incorrect PPSNs being submitted on the system. When you click view, then it'll actually show you what those items that need to be corrected are. The statement is then where the employer will need to go monthly. In this case, I've just created 4 statements to show you what it'll look like. The very bottom one there for January 2019 has been deemed, which means the employer was happy with what was returned to them on the statement. They didn't do anything and we deemed it as their return. The next one was accepted by the employer. The one above that was accepted, but there is an outstanding amount that needs to be paid. They have the option there to go in and make a payment. And then the one above that is due. So if we go into view, the one above that, if we click on view accept, what it brings you up is in the top box, the statement, which summary details, which shows you everything that you have submitted for that particular period in relation to that PREM registration number. So if you have weekly and monthly payrolls, each one of those will be summarised and totaled in that summary box. You then have the option to click agree with the summary, or as I said, if you do nothing, we will deem it as your return. PPSN checker. This is something that we set live in April this year. It's in ROS. You do need a digital cert to be able to access it. And it allows you to check 10 PPSNs at any one time. There is security and a CAPTCHA on it, but the results that will come back to you will say, yes, you can use this PPSN, or no, you need to speak to the employee to confirm that the PPSN they've given you is correct. It's very simple to use. You fill in the basic details, name, surname, PPSN, address, date of birth if you have it, and then you can see there you can add up to 10 employees. You do the CAPTCHA security and submit it. What comes back to you looks something like this. The top line is valid, the next one is invalid. When you click on the valid one, it tells you that this is valid based on the information that we hold, and you can now go ahead and use that PPSN. The invalid one says we were unable to validate the details you had supplied. So you need to go back and check with the employee. You also need to check that you haven't entered in maybe an incorrect digit or an incorrect character there when you actually searched for the PPSN. As part of the stakeholder engagement process, we have been out and about meeting with employers, and certainly some of the issues that have come to light include net pay arrangements. And what we would suggest is that net pay arrangements are not something that are agreed between employers and employees. They can leave the employer exposed to additional liability where the employee has reallocated their credits, and the employer may not find this out until they actually go to do their end of year processing, which is as is in the current system. In the new system, there's no need to set up a net pay arrangement because you will have access to the latest tax credits and rates for every employee when you go to pay them. There's also the possibility that any shortfall that's identified will be the responsibility of the employer, but under the new legislation, this liability can also be grossed up. Again, back to the end of year process, and it is something that you need to be looking at now and putting internal processes in place to make sure that you are not focused on an end of year. Every month is now a statutory return, so December and January are no different from April and May, and every month needs to be timely and accurate. It's also important to bear in mind that the whole process is very visible. It's visible to ourselves in revenue, but it's also visible to your employees, and they need to be able to reconcile their payslips with the data that has been submitted to revenue on their behalf. Corrections, we know, form part of the payroll process, and as Paul mentioned, you will have the opportunity to correct data either in the submission that you've made or in a future submission. If you do get back a statement that requires you to fix something that's incorrect, you will be legally obliged to fix that and return that information to revenue. The list of employees is something that we have been asking employers to comply with over the last couple of months. And really, I suppose the purpose of this is that we want to be able to match the people that you have as registered as working for you with those that we have as registered on the revenue system, and to ensure that RPNs issue for all employees for 1/1/19. So we're doing it in 3 tranches, and the final tranche is about to start now. When you log on to ROS, there'll be a notification in ROS to tell you that it's now your turn to log on and submit your employee list. The payroll software developers have designed reports that you can pull and submit. There is an e-brief available on revenue.ie, and the employer help desk, the number for which is there on the slides, will handle any issues or queries that you have in relation to that. Just to give you an idea of some of the events that we have been participating in over the last couple of weeks, we've been out and about meeting with a lot of representative bodies, smaller accountants, payroll providers, payroll bureaus, and certainly we will continue to do that as the project progresses. We've issued letters to all employers advising them of the PAYE changes, and we will be issuing another letter in September to all employers. We've been attending, as I said, a huge amount of outreach events. There is a focus on the moment on PAYE and PREM, and there are compliance visits being conducted by regional teams to ensure that people are correctly operating in terms of their PAYE obligations. We also have customer service visits which are happening all around the country as well, and this is where a member of the customer service team will call out to help and assist you to get ready for PAYE modernisation. They're not calling out to look at books and records. We'll also have a media and advertising campaign running from September to December, and we're hoping to kick off our revenue regional seminars starting on the 20th of September and running right through to the end of October, and they'll hopefully be going live this week. So in terms of preparing for PAYE modernisation, make sure that you have the right PPSN for everybody that you're going to pay. Make sure that everybody is registered with revenue, and make sure you're operating the most up-to-date tax credit cert for all your employees. Make sure that up until the go live date, you complete the P45, P46 process for anybody who starts or stops working for you. Make sure you look at your internal controls, particularly where you're paying BIK. We would suggest, particularly for the likes of cars, that you would review those now excuse me, monthly, but most definitely at least quarterly, and making sure that you're aware of your duties as an employer at the end of the year. As I said, the seminars will be taking place through September and October. They'll be free to attend. We will have live demonstration screens of how the ROS system is going to work and look. And you can request to attend on revenue.ie. As I said, it's going to become an Eventbrite ticketed event. We have over 109 venues all over the country, from Donegal right down to Kerry, Tralee, and you'll be able to select on a particular venue and date and a time, and then you will be issued with a ticket which you would need to bring to the event with you. That's what it looks like at the moment up on the revenue.ie website. That will be switching over, and it'll bring you to an Eventbrite screen, probably from later today, if not tomorrow. We have a huge amount of information available on our systems, and certainly the ROS help desk is there to assist you with any technical type queries you might have. On our own page under employing people, there's a tab there, PAYE Modernisation, and certainly we'd be more than happy for you to click on there and look at the information that's available. And we also have a dedicated email address. If we don't get to maybe some of your questions today, please feel free to come and send us an email to that, and the team in the office will certainly be able to help you. So thanks very much, and I'll hand back over to Rachel now.
Thanks, Sinead. That was very interesting. So just while we have a 1 minute sales pitch, while we have your undivided attention. In today's webinar, we used Thesaurus Payroll Manager to give you an insight into how PAYE modernisation will work. Both Thesaurus Payroll Manager and our other payroll package, BrightPay, will be able to seamlessly handle PAYE Modernisation. We have the experience and expertise, having already done it in the UK. The Bureau version of BrightPay, which handles an unlimited number of payroll clients and an unlimited number of employees, cost us £299 plus VAT per tax year. So there will be no additional charges for implementing PAYE Modernisation. BrightPay has many useful features to help with the administration of your payroll processing. You can roll back employees on an individual basis, you can create your own custom reports, and payroll journal exports are available to Xero, Sage and QuickBooks. Earlier in today's webinar, I showed you Thesaurus Connect, but we do also have BrightPay Connect, which is very similar, with automated backups of payroll data and the ability to invite clients and their employees to their own self-service portals. With BrightPay, you can also import previous payroll data from Sage, CallSoft and the Big Red Book, so you can hit the ground running knowing that you're using the right software for PAYE Modernisation. I just want to say also that we are working with a number of associations that are helping their members with PAYE Modernisation. We are offering a free partnership platform to Irish associations where you can provide free PAYE Modernisation training and free training on our payroll software products. Our customers also benefit from free phone and email support. Our partnership platform allows us to offer association members introductory discounts. So if you're a member of an association or if you're involved in the running of an association, please get in touch and we'll see how we can help your members through their PAYE Modernisation journey. With the new GDPR legislation, we cannot email you unless you subscribe to our mailing list. So make sure to sign up to hear more about upcoming free events and PAYE Modernisation updates. Our newsletters also include special offers and discounts throughout the year, and you can also unsubscribe at any time if you wish to do so. Here are our next PAYE Modernisation webinars, which are taking place in November. These webinars will not be the same content that was covered today, although there may be a little bit of overlap, so you're more than welcome to join us again in November. So finally then, it's time for the questions and answers. There are a lot of questions that came through already, so apologies if we don't get to answer your specific question. There is also a lot of repetition in the questions, so try to listen out for all the questions as it might be asked in a different way by someone else. So just bear with us now for 1 minute while we get set up for the questions. We have a bit of musical chairs and getting the webcam turned on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. So as Rachel said, there's a lot of, I suppose, repetition in the questions. We have tried to strip those out. If I could just cover a couple of the hot topics, if you like, where we're answering a lot of the duplicate questions. So a good few questions in relation to the list of employees and the deadline. So I mean, the deadline for that is the end of October, so it can be uploaded any time up until then. I think just to mention as well that you can only upload it once. So if you do have a split payroll, you should create the different files but upload them to revenue at the one time so they read it as one file. And I suppose a lot of people are concerned about it being out of date, you know, come the end of the year. So revenue appreciation, there are going to be changes, and that's why they would encourage you then in the meantime for any starters or leavers to follow the usual process of P46s and P45s. Does that cover everything on that?
That's absolutely spot on.
A lot of questions about the payment. So just to stress again, there's no change to payment arrangements. So whatever the current arrangement you have, that will remain in place for 1/1/19. But I suppose very important to make sure that you're meeting your liability with whatever arrangement you do have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's fair. It'd be good to mention as well the variable direct debit.
Yeah, I think Sinead mentioned that.
Yeah.
But
And I suppose if you're on a current direct debit and maybe you want to switch to the variable direct debit, that will be available nearer to the go live date, and there will be clear instructions from the Collector Generals in terms of payments and liability. And we still have the option where people are quarterly payers and annual payers. They'll still be able to pay quarterly and pay annually, but they must file their information in terms of each payroll run every time they run it. So the payment for those people will remain the same.
have to say the thing I liked about the variable direct debit was you don't have to remember to go into Ross each month to, basically sign off a payment. So effectively, if you're using payroll software and you're using the variable direct debit, you don't really need to go near Ross at all in relation to PRSI anyway.
A lot of questions, Sinead, in relation to penalties for late submissions or late reporting of starters, leavers, and people really wanted to know if Revenue are going to issue details of penalties.
The penalty regime is currently under review, and we will have clear guidance on that shortly. It's with our own legislation teams at the moment, because obviously with the P35 that was a statutory report and penalties attached to that. You now have a monthly statutory report, which technically means interest can run monthly. So again, that all has to be laid out quite specifically, and we will have guidelines for that. We're hoping that we will be able to offer a bedding in facility where there will be a period of time where obviously people need to get used to the system, but I can't really comment on that at the moment because it's outside my own remit, but it is with the legislation side.
Perfect.
Yes, I think it was good in the UK. They basically had a year, was it? Or, where there was no penalties.
We're not sure yet at the time frame.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be good to have one. Paul, I suppose a lot of questions around the digital certificates, when they should be added, what do you do when you've multiple Ross digital certs? Does entering the cert retrieve everything from Ross? Exactly, I suppose, how the certs will work.
Yeah, well, actually, it's the thing I'm actually working on at the moment within the software, so I probably have a bit more current information. Well, it's my understanding for a start, the agent cert will be associated with just the one TAIN. So for your typical practice who only has one TAIN, there'll only be one agent cert for that practice. Now, there may also be employers who aren't covered by the agent cert, and they'll have their own employer certs. So basically the way the software will work is that, okay, if you're an agent, you can install the agent cert, but if there are particular employers you're dealing with that aren't accessible through that agent cert, you can also add the employer cert under that particular employer. So what the software will do anytime it's making a submission, it'll say, first of all, hey, have I got an employer cert here? If it does, it'll use that. If there's no employer cert, it'll say, okay, is there an agent cert? It'll try and use that. Now, I'm hoping that covers all eventualities, but obviously it's something that we're going to be doing a lot of testing on, particularly in terms of server type environments, because I know a lot of accountants would use remote servers to host all their software and data, and fortunately we have links with a number of accountants who do that sort of thing, so we can test in their environments hopefully substantially before this actually goes live. So yeah, but it is probably the one thing, digital cert side of things is probably the one thing I feel is probably going to cause some issues, maybe not necessarily so much for accountancy firms, but for normal employers. But at least it would be a one-off effectively, and we will have loads and loads of help, including videos if possible, how to handle all the different scenarios.
So we probably have more to show on that in November. I suppose if anyone has maybe big concerns about their setup or something, maybe they could email us and make sure, I suppose, that we've thought of everything.
Yeah, indeed. I suppose at the end of the day, look, if you can access Ross on the computer that you're using for the payroll, there shouldn't be an issue.
A few of these questions, Sinead, can the RPN be manually changed, for instance, for directors? Will it affect anything? Directors don't normally have the PAYE credit, but have the earned credit, and sometimes they don't come through from revenue. And we've had the other stance where they're getting the PAYE credit, but they shouldn't. So they're asking.
Well, I suppose we've been looking at all of those instances, and a lot of it is because they haven't been correctly recorded on the system, maybe as a director, when they were registered, etc. So it is something that we're aware of, but no, they shouldn't be amending an RPN. The RPN has been issued based on the information that we hold for that individual. Now, like everything, there's always instances maybe where something is incorrect or something has issued incorrectly. If that is the case, then that individual needs to contact Revenue directly and they can sort that out for them. But in general, what's sent out on the RPN is what the employer or the payroll operator should use.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of questions around my account. I suppose people want to know, is it mandatory for employees to register? And I suppose the general opinion coming through is that people find my account registration and then the utility in general difficult to use, and are there plans to make it easier?
Okay, it isn't mandatory, but we would encourage employers to encourage their employees to register, because it will make everything far easier for them in the new system, particularly if they're looking for P60 type information, if they're going for a loan or anything like that. They'll now have an end of year statement available to them, but they'll also have a statement at any point in time during the year, so they can go on and see exactly, and and sometimes if you're going maybe for leasing of something or other, they might actually want an up-to-date statement of your pay and tax. So again, you'll have that there. It's not mandatory, but as I
recommended.
said, yeah. In terms of the difficulties with registering, yes, it is clunky, and yes, there are steps to it, and we've had to design it that way from a security perspective, from a GDPR perspective, and just to make sure that John is the correct person that's logging on to Ross, and that it's not somebody else's account. And yeah, I know it can be difficult, and if they don't have all of the details when they're actually registering, then it comes out by post, and that takes a little bit longer. So I suppose we would be encouraging employers to explain to their employees what's required, and we will have an employee advertising campaign towards the end of the year, again encouraging them to go onto my account and setting out what's required for them at that stage.
Perfect, thank you. What happens if the payroll run needs to be corrected, but it has already been submitted to revenue? So I think you touched on that, Paul, during your presentation in relation to corrections.
Yeah, it's the one that's just been submitted. It's very easy to roll back, and basically what the rollback does, it creates a deletion submission for that particular run that has been submitted. So it basically cancels, on revenue system, and it creates the space again for the new submission to overwrite it.
Yeah, so somebody's just asking, if the employer wants to add a new employee to the payroll and the employee is not appearing on ROS, can the payroll bureau process payslips for the new employee on the emergency basis? So I mean, this comes down to the RPN for a new employee. And I mean, if their credits or cut-off points aren't allocated to another employer, you will, send it back, provided it's
once they have a PPSN for somebody, we will issue an RPN.
It could be
but
zero.
That could be a zero, absolutely. And if it's a zero, then that's what they need to operate.
Yeah.
If it's a thing that they have a new starter and that person hasn't gone on and registered with my account, then yes, they're not going to appear on the revenue system. If it's somebody who's never worked in the state before, they can still pay them, they can still submit the information without a PPSN for up to 3 months, but the ideal is that they would get a PPSN. And certainly I think from an employer's perspective, as part of their onboarding process, they should make it a requirement that you can't get paid until you have a PPSN.
So Paul, this is probably coming down to your check ROS utility. Somebody's just asking, what happens if the taxes per the revenue differs from the taxes per the payroll?
Well, I'm working on the facility to be able to drill right down to line items, even within the payroll. When I say line items here, each pay slip is effectively a line item in terms of what gets submitted on the PSR. So I'll be working on being able to try and highlight where line items might differ or haven't been logged by revenue. Typically, it would be out of sync if our icon at the top is saying 1 outstanding or 2 outstanding in terms of PSORs, and normally when you submit those, then everything is synced up and is correct. But I do fear situations where, say, people have system failures, they don't have backups, and we're trying to rebuild. And so it's the amount of information we can get back from revenue in relation to line items that have been submitted is somewhat limited, and that it's really only the taxes that we can get as against taxes that are associated with PPS numbers per line item. We don't have the gross pay or USC will pay or things like that. So it probably just becomes a lot more important, I suppose, to ensure that backups are kept, or I suppose a plug here for Source Connect. At least you'll always have a backup in that particular case. But that's why the reconciliations need to happen. I know in the UK, I mean, it happens all the time that HMRC are looking for a liability that, you know, it comes nowhere near what the UK payroll is saying is outstanding. And I don't know what the usual reason is for that. Probably employment IDs or comes down to things like that.
Sometimes just they've made a change to their payroll, but they didn't submit the correction submission, or for the most part, I mean, they do match. But
just on that reconciliation, it's important to bear in mind that we won't be manipulating any of the figures that are submitted. So everything that comes into us will be based on the payroll submission. We won't be going in and saying, oh, look, John should have got 600 and they've only given him 500, or, you know, it looks like they've calculated the tax wrong there. We won't be doing any manipulation. So really, the revenue system should reflect what has been submitted by the payroll.
There's a big difference in the UK as well, as if you don't send a submission, they do an estimation, where you won't do that. If you don't send a submission, you'll assume nobody got paid.
Yes, exactly.
I suppose just on that same train of thought, and I suppose is something you probably don't want to hear, Sinead, but you know, if somebody comes to us, say in January, and they've been doing it manually, or they've been using another system, and the whole thing is just rubbish, you know, whatever the information is coming back, or it just doesn't make sense. We will probably have a facility to actually delete everything to date and to rebuild it there and then. And I know that's probably not what you've been designing it for, but I think in the first month or two, we're going to have to, you know, cater for situations like that.
Yeah.
Okay. If a director takes a regular payment each month, can they use monthly payroll for PSR using total of payments received in the month?
They have to return it every single time they receive a payment. So
perhaps that should be weekly.
That would mean a weekly return or a daily return. It depends really on, you know, the level of the payments. But again, we're back to, as Paul said earlier, follow the money. When was the person paid? And at that point in time, then that should be returned.
So we have some staff being paid weekly and others being paid monthly under the same employer tax number. Would we be filing two sets of PSRs? I mean, absolutely, there'll be PSRs for every pay frequency. And then just a follow on that question is, would you be better off setting up a new PAYE number? So again, that really is down to whether or not.
Yeah, in most cases, the monthly and the weekly just work hand in hand anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a case where, say it was two payroll operators that were typically doing both, or sorry, either. Well, then it's because you might want to keep, you know, confidential some of the information from one to the other.
Absolutely.
Or whatever. But in that case, well, then it should be two registration numbers.
This is a common enough one, again, related to directors. Every year submit a supplementary P35 with director's salary. The reason for the late submission is the auditors need to prepare year-end accounts before they can process a salary. How will the new legislation affect this?
Again, you're back to follow the money. If they're being paid it in 2018, then it's taxed in 2018. But
reported.
And reported at that point in time. If they've been paid it in 2019, then it's reported in 2019. So again, you're back to follow the money, but as a director, they will have the opportunity when they're doing their own Form 11, if they want to go back and allocate some of that money to the previous year because it was actually due for 2018 and they weren't paid until 2019 because again, it had to be voted or whatever the case may be. So there's no real change to directors except that when it's paid, it must be notified.
Somebody's just asking, are there any end of year reports to be given to the employees? So, I mean, Sinead, you mentioned there will be a payment and deduction statement, if you like, in my account available to employees at the end of the year.
Absolutely, and they'll be able to go on and get that. And for anybody who isn't enabled, we will have a form of an integrated option on our phone lines where maybe if you're looking for an end of year statement, you'll press 2 and you'll be asked for your PPSN, etc., and then we'll issue that manually.
Obviously, just to mention again that this coming January, February, you'll still have to give the P60s and P35s for the 2018 year.
And on those P60s for this year, we have printed on them, this is your last P60.
Sinead, this one is for you. In Paul's presentation, he said employees would expect to see their most up-to-date information in their My Account. Are Revenue going to give information to employees that this facility will not be available to them for the first few months, and why?
Yeah, well, there isn't any point in us just putting up 1 month of information. It's not going to be very meaningful. So what we want is to allow 2 or 3 months of the information to come in, and then we can formulate the information so that it'll have meaning for them. And at that point, we'll have been able to collate the information ourselves that has come in.
I think you just want to make sure we're getting it right.
We don't want to say, oh, oops, the payroll is wrong. So yeah, we want to make it meaningful. And like when we're out there and we've been meeting with employers, we have been telling them that it won't be available until probably the end of March, because it needs to be meaningful. Just putting up 1 month of information won't really mean anything for them. And again, as part of the advertising campaign, that will be included.
Okay. So somebody's just asking if employees are paid on a Friday, is it okay to do it on the Monday? And absolutely, it's on or before, and yeah, that's no problem. Somebody's asking if they don't know the cessation date for an employee, what should they do?
Well, as soon as the date becomes available, they'll have to put it in on the system. I'm not sure why you would.
Yes, somebody will have to know the cessation date. You know,
if you're running the last payroll run for somebody, you've been told that this is their last payroll run, so a cessation date would be required. I suppose if you happened to be running it and you don't know if it's going to be next week or the week after, you know, you will have to go in and put in a cessation date, because otherwise their employment is going to remain live with that employer, and their tax credits and rate bands won't be available to their new employer.
Yeah.
I guess just corollary of that is that the employee themselves would be able to go into their My account and say, well, actually, I want all my new credits. And
we will have the facility, hopefully, as well, for the employee to go in and cease it themselves.
Yeah. So somebody's just asking, what's the earliest date you can make a submission for 2019, given that a lot of people will have to do this in advance with the way, you know, Christmas.
Well, we will have the RPNs for 2019 available, hopefully around first into the beginning of the second week of December. That's our plan.
Similar to the P2Cs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So technically, once they're available, you'll be able to run your payroll for that period, because we know a lot of people run January in December, holidays, and people are not available. So those tax credits will be available early December, so they should be able to.
People can assume once they're available, you'll accept submissions to Thesaurus.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's just, I suppose it's a comment more than anything, is worrying for accountants who do a lot of wages for clients. It's fine if the wages are for a period or paid a week later, but in most cases they aren't. How do we get around this? I could have 150 to 180 employers' wages to complete every week, and if they all come into me on a Friday, I suppose if the employees are paid, like somebody must be working out, I suppose, what the payment is.
Again, that's back to an internal process, and they need to go and look at that and how the information is being fed into them, and now the timeliness of that information. And I suppose they have a couple of months now to work on that with the various employers and to explain to them that these are now legislative requirements and that they need to get the information in as early as possible to them.
Yeah. So just if you're running a monthly payroll and one person leaves before the end of the month and you calculate the pay for this person but only do the rest at the end of the month as normal, will this be deemed a late submission as one of the employees was paid prior to the submission being made? So I mean, this is handled via the software, really.
It's a separate submission.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you'll pay and report at the time the employee leaves, and then everyone else gets reported at the end of the month or the period. So somebody's just saying, if they get a new client mid-year, do they just download the Ross RPN, or will they need to get something from the previous accountant or the previous payroll administrator?
No, where they get a new client mid-year, they'll be able to access that person's details.
Well, they'll be able to get the RPN.
Yeah.
But they won't be able to get the cumulatives to date.
They won't,
the mid-year
so they will need something,
They will need
something.
Now, I am working on something within our software to help with that and to minimize the amount of querying that you need to do on cumulatives. But it will have gaps, and it won't be 100%. So yeah, unfortunately, you will still need to get information from the previous accountant, I think, in a lot of cases.
Okay, so Sinead, somebody's just asking about the Revenue Roadshow. They've registered but haven't gotten anything. So once Eventbrite goes...
Eventbrite should be going live in the next day or so, and the first seminar is in Sligo on the 20th of September, and then there's various dates following on from that. Some days there's a couple of seminars on in different counties at different times, so it can be very easy. Literally just pop on to whatever county you want.
They all get an email once they've registered interest.
Anybody who has registered is going to get an email to tell them that Eventbrite is ready to go.
Perfect. Somebody's just asking, can you still offset monthly statement liability against RCTs held on account?
Yeah, there's no change to those offsetting facilities.
Okay. Are P21s also scrapped? What replaces them?
They'll be still there for 2018, and then, as I said, we're going to do an automatic end of year for review for everybody at the end of 2019. So when we get that process up and running, we'll then review whether there's a need for a P21, because what we may do then is more regular reconciliations for everybody, because now people only get a P21 if they actually come and request it themselves, whereas we can now, because we have the information, we should be able to run it from a system base.
Yeah, so presumably somebody goes online to claim medical expenses, whatever, you automatically carry out a review. You won't have to request anything. Yeah. The list of employees doesn't seem to have a section for payment frequency. So it doesn't matter. The list of employees should be for all employees
It's irrelevant in terms of their pay frequency.
Yeah, and again, I don't know if I said this actually, but I mean, payroll software is, regardless of which one you're using, should have the facility for the list of employees, and you simply just create it and log into Ross and upload it.
I just saw a question there where somebody asked, when did they add the digital certificate? Well, typically you do that as part of when you set up the employers or when you're bringing them across. If you haven't added the digital certificate and you try to make a submission or query RPNs, it'll just come back to you saying, look, you don't have the digital certificate installed, so you can go off and do it then anyway. So it's not a big deal.
I think a lot of, so there's been questions coming in since we've started answering questions, but I think a lot of them really have already been covered. I
see somebody there is mentioning that they actually have 2 TAINs.
You have 2 agent certs.
Yeah, so I look, as I say, that's something I'm actually working on at the moment. Practically everything else within the payroll has been done for 2019, and this is the last piece of the jigsaw. So I'm going to be doing a lot of research into that side of things. I didn't actually know you could have 2 TAINs with the 1 agent, so it's something I'm going to have to deal with.
It's good to talk.
Yeah.
It's good to know that now rather than 1119.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm just trying to see if there's anything kind of new here. I mean, I will review them over the next couple of days, and if I find anything we haven't covered, I will get back to people.
I also saw another one there, just as you're scrolling down. Why choose Thesaurus over BrightPay?
Or was it why choose BrightPay over Thesaurus?
No, I think it was actually Thesaurus. But I suppose, look, Thesaurus is, if people are used to using it, they probably don't want to change. If I had somebody new coming on board at this stage, I would probably recommend BrightPay because it is the more modern. It is the more modern software.
A couple of things. I suppose BrightPay caters for more pay frequencies. You can design your own reports quite easily. You can spread employees' pay across multiple departments in a pay period, which you can't do with Thesaurus. But I guess if somebody has Thesaurus that's working for them, there's no need or requirement to change.
And previously, it did have the advantage of BrightPay was the one that you could roll back individual employees in, but Thesaurus, you would be able to do that in 2019 anyway.
So if anyone was thinking of changing for that reason, they don't have to.
Yeah.
Sinead, just one there. When registering for a revenue seminar, it states the survey is currently closed.
Yeah. So I haven't been in the office today, obviously, because I'm here, but we were planning on closing the existing survey in order to get the Eventbrite up and running. So what you're telling me is they've been working away furiously while I haven't been there, and that's now closed, which means the other one will probably go live very shortly. So what I would suggest is maybe if you leave it until tomorrow, or if you have already registered, you'll get an email to tell you that the Eventbrite is live. But the plan is that it should be up and running very shortly, particularly if the initial one is closed now.
So somebody's just asking there, if an employee has a second employment, does Ross automatically, or will Ross automatically transfer available credits and cut-offs to the new employment?
No.
Or does the employee, yeah.
No, it's really in the control of the employee, but certainly I think when we're going to do that end of year review, we will suggest a split in terms of where we know what the person is earning within, you know, between two jobs, and particularly at that point in time, we'll have had a year of the information.
Yeah.
We'll be able to suggest, well, look, it might be better if you put X here and Y there. But at the moment, no, it's in the control of the employee.
Somebody's just saying there they're having trouble uploading the list of employees. So I mean, if you're using Thesaurus or BrightPay, if you just want to drop me an email maybe with the, I suppose the error you're getting or the difficulty you're having, so you can email the email address there on screen, PAYE Modernisation at thesaurus.ie. So somebody's just saying you may have employees within a company that get paid on different days in a week. What happens there? So again, you'll have different submissions. Now that's not a facility that's currently available in Thesaurus, so that would be another reason to use BrightPay, that you can have different pay dates for employees on the same pay frequency. But you would expect a submission in respect of each of those pay days.
Time they're paid.
If it's 5 days in the week, 6. Yeah. So somebody's just saying there the list of employees not available on Ross yet. So I mean, you did mention the last
tranche are going live now. I would say this week, I think, is when.
Because at the meeting on Monday, actually, they said it was already gone live.
Yeah, I think it is live. So maybe just go back in and check and see, because certainly there was a banner there, but you have to log in using the digital cert, I think.
And once you do the upload, does that banner then disappear?
It does. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Don't know. I think we've covered most.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of out of time anyway. And I know Sinead is very, very busy these days.
Keen to get back to the office.
Okay, well listen, thank you very much everyone for joining us, and thank you for Sinead once again, and Audrey for going through all those questions. And hopefully we'll see.
Sorry, there's somebody saying they've 3 tains, Paul. See what?
Say that?
Somebody's saying they've got 3 tains.
Okay, so
it's not just 2. We need to cater for it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.